Come in, Ocean Sailor. Come in, Ocean Sailor.
The Ocean Sailor Podcast. Brought to you by Ocean Sailor Magazine and Kraken Yachts. This podcast was recorded during the coronavirus pandemic. All participants adhered to social distancing and coronavirus guidelines at all times.
Hello, you are listening to Ocean Sailor Podcast with me, Dick Durham, and with he, Dick Beaumont.
Hi, Dick. Glad you've made it through the severe weather to the studio. Brilliant, eh?
Yeah, so what you might describe as a winter without the wonderland.
Yeah, 4 centimetres of snow in the UK charter course. But I'm more going in the Billy Connolly camp, and his thing was there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. But today out there, it's pretty bloody chilly.
Well, I'm sure it is, and whatever Billy thinks about the weather in Scotland, I hope he tuned into our last podcast, because it seems everybody else did.
Yeah, it was a bit amazing, eh, Dick? I'm very, very impressed with the amount of people that's listened to us. It was exceptionally good. And, yeah, good stuff.
Well, I mean, I just as well we're not on telly, otherwise people would want to rush up and touch our oilskins, or not that you can at the moment. Because
I'm not quite sure that we might get to that level, Dick.
No.
But anyway, yeah, good.
Possibly not. But anyway, of course, we are going to talk about climate change. I mean, every yachtsman uses tactics to deal with weather, but weather has a strategy called climate. And we can all agree that's changing. The rain might not be wetter, but there's more of it. Storms may be no stronger, but they're more frequent. Polar ice caps are calving. Sea creatures pop up in the wrong place. Now, scientists say they have evidence that it is man-made, whereas internet combers say it's a conspiracy. But whether it's a skewed axis of the world or a surfeit of axles on the road, we're here to discuss the effects.
The puns are getting worse, mate. They're getting worse. But, yeah, I mean, I think what we'd like to talk about, isn't it, Dick, is climate change and how it affects sailing. Because there's been some dramatic effects, I think, to sailors' planning and so forth. So we can, let's get sort of straight into it, I guess.
Well, why not? I mean, I know that you're convinced that it is man-made, Dick. I mean, what's your thinking behind that?
Yeah, I'm convinced it is. When it happens that I was in my earlier trading years in China a fair bit. China's, of course, very much in the news these days. But in those days, I first went into China in the early 80s. It was a very, very different place. And if you flew in, it was an amazing thing because you'd fly into a massive city like Guangzhou, and you thought you were landing in the countryside because there were no lights. If you go there now, the whole country, not just Guangzhou, but every city is lit up like Las Vegas. And so I think, obviously, that's had an effect. But the particular thing that I noticed in the times that I was there is when I was there in the early 80s, in October and March was pretty well the end of the winter season and the steady season, the northeast monsoons. You could see the stars and the sun every day, clearly. And that pertained right the way through to probably about the mid to late 90s, and then it started to change. But the facts of the matter are, if you go to China now, or actually any time over the last 10 years, you won't see the sun. Over 95% of China, you won't even see the sun. And unbelievable though it might sound, actually, Chinese tourists are going to places like New Zealand on stargazing holidays because they don't see the stars in China. Mm-hmm. And my belief, and the things that I've sort of tried to, in my own mind, splice together, is something that I saw occurring through the industrialisation of China, which is a huge smog and a blanket that sits over China and the mainland. And of course, it's one of the biggest landmasses, it probably is the biggest landmass in the world. And it was the landmass that generated the northeast monsoon and the southwest monsoon. And those monsoons are dramatically changing.
Oh, right. So that's down to...
Well, my thinking on it is this, that there's a kind of a thermal blanket sitting over that huge landmass. And if there's created by the emissions and the smog and the carbon dioxide and so forth, and that if that's the case, then it's not warming up or cooling like it was. And so, of course, that's what's caused. It's the warming of the land and the cooling of the land in the winter that was causing the northeast monsoon and the southwest monsoon.
So this really is a kind of local greenhouse effect.
Yeah, but it's not so local. I mean, I sailed out there for many, many years in the whole region. And the north, yeah, okay, let me explain. The northeast monsoon from China affects everywhere right the way down, as far as Thailand, as far as Indonesia. It's covering a huge, huge area. And to give you some idea, you almost were able to set your watch by when the northeast monsoon and the southwest monsoon would start.
So, Dick, tell us, what is a monsoon? We don't get them in Europe, do we?
No. Well, it's really an established weather pattern. People think of the monsoon as rain. Yeah. It's not actually rain. It might be raining. The southwest monsoon in the South China Seas is a very rainy and a very stormy season. But the monsoon really is just another word for season. The difference is, and this is kind of the critical thing, as I said, you could almost set your watch by it. Let's go this way. 23rd to 25th of April to the 2nd or 3rd of May is when the monsoon would start. And that would be the southwest monsoon, the summer monsoon. But because of what I believe is happening in over the landmass of China...
Just on that. Yeah. So what causes that?
That's the land...
What was traditionally causing that?
The China landmass warming up.
Right.
Creating massive convection and bringing in strong winds.
Right, okay.
To go through the...
Because the sea's colder.
Nothing to do with the sea. It's the land warming up that's creating the convection.
Right.
And the opposite is the northeast monsoon, which is the land cooling down, creating the wind patterns that drop down and the density of air in the high pressure systems that it was causing. And the southwest monsoon is the violent one, and the northeast monsoon is the steady winds, the one we actually like to sail those oceans and those areas in. But now I can tell you it's not unusual for the southwest monsoon, for example, to start as early as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of April, or as late as middle of May almost.
Oh, really?
And that monsoon is created by warming up. The one that's cooling down, the northeast monsoon, that's actually even more displaced, because there's this thermal blanket over it and it's not cooling down. So you find that the northeast monsoon is now starting much later, and the southwest monsoon generally is starting much earlier. And since it's the southwest monsoon that creates all the disturbances, the storms, the typhoons, which is what they are in that area, you've got a much longer season that's occurring that is susceptible to severe weather.
Okay, so is it not? Can't we just adjust our diaries? Is it?
Yeah, well, yeah, of course we've had to. I mean, the facts are. The problem, though, is a different one, because not only, and this is really where we get into how it affects sailing. Not only is the monsoon seasons are they changing, but also you've got a lot more extreme weather occurring out of season and out of area. The typhoon areas And a typhoon, a cyclone, and a hurricane is actually the same thing, just different geographic areas of the world. They sit and occur and have been occurring for millennia in certain regions. And for example, you will, until recently, you would find virtually no typhoons occurring in the South China Sea below 10 degrees north.
Right.
But here's the kicker. I've been caught twice in the last 12 years or 15 years in those areas by typhoons that have formed. One, a forming typhoon when I was sailing from the Philippines to Kota Kinabalu, and I was at 9 degrees north. So, obviously the typhoon hadn't read the book and didn't know it wasn't supposed to be there. And it was also in the month of April, which is generally not considered to be within the monsoon season, southwest monsoon season. But yeah, I got caught and hit on the way to Kota Kinabalu in April with a forming typhoon. And that was before my days of having satellite communication for grid files and weather. So, it was just, we didn't know what was happening. We knew it was getting worse and worse and worse. We'd left land. We'd gone.
And this was just with barometer dropping, I guess?
Yeah, it was watching the barometer and the hydrometer and seeing the seas getting heavier and heavier. The funny part of that story is that we got bashed for about 36 hours. We were a pretty short crew. And my mate who was on the helm at this particular time, I was down below doing some nav work. He shouted down, "Hey, Dick, it looks like we're out of it." I said, "Oh, great. Why is that?" And he said, "We got clear sky." I said, "Oh, fantastic." I came out the companionway, looked up, and straight away was horrified because I knew we were in the eye of the typhoon, and there was this blue eye looking down on us. So it meant that we got it all to come again, and we got bashed again for another 36 hours trying to get out the other side of it. And so that was kind of the first time that I got caught. But much more recently, about 6 years ago, I was sailing from New Zealand to Hong Kong, and I was up in Micronesia, and we were sitting in this beautiful atoll just not far from Chuuk Lagoon, and we planned to stay there for 3 or 4 days. But as I did now, I had satellite communications and I had the grid files. So I downloaded my grid files for the area that I would normally look at. And right out towards the east, I saw the grid files, the isobars were all on the grid files, were all close together. I thought, I wonder what that is. So I then dialed in and got the next forecast over in the geographical area over. And right in the middle of it, quite clearly, there's a cyclone coming.
All right.
So a typhoon, actually, as it was called there. Yeah. What I did is I went ashore, and I mean, this was at 7 degrees north. So I'm quite a long way out of where that typhoon belt was expected to be.
Right.
And I'm also, we're in March, not even in the season. Right. But there's and you kind of double check, you can't, that can't be. No, that's definitely a cyclone or a typhoon. So I went ashore and told the village, and they'd got a link, actually. The village elder had a link, and he said, "Oh yes, we've seen it coming too." And of course, and what I decided to do was bugger off and keep in front of it.
Yeah.
But that poor atoll must have got absolutely smashed because the highest thing on it was 3 foot out the water, a metre out the water. And then, so we upped sticks, or upped anchor, I should say. And then I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll carry on trying to get out of its way. And I could see it was coming straight down towards me. And we stayed about 500, 600 miles in front of it. It was forecast to then go north, but it didn't. It carried on in a straight line. And then I thought, well, okay, I'll go to my next part. Can't stop there. Moved on again, just keeping that kind of distance in front of it. And we had planned to take a curve and go up north towards Yap, because Yap was well outside the typhoon belt, as was expected.
Where is Yap, Dick? Where is that?
Yap's Micronesia. It's on the end of Micronesia. But I decided, no, I didn't fancy this. It didn't look like it was going to start swinging north. So I went south a bit to Palau, and it went straight through Yap and decimated Yap. It was the first typhoon that had hit there in 20 years. So there's no doubt in my mind it is big time changing.
Right.
And I think we're lucky, humans have got the technology to keep in front of these things a bit, and satellite communication and being able to download grid files will hopefully help people avoid, really running into trouble.
This is, my only experience of a typhoon is reading Joseph Conrad. Yeah. And he described it this way. The morning was fine. The oily sea heaved without a sparkle, and there was a queer white misty patch in the sky like a halo of the sun. A crosswell set in as the glass started to fall. A dense bank of cloud became visible to the northward, and it had a sinister dark olive tint and lay down motionless and low upon the sea, resembling a solid obstacle in the path of the ship. It gives a nice picture, but it doesn't give you any sense of how big it is.
Well, no, it gives a nice picture written on a page. A typhoon coming your way is a very scary thing. And to be honest with you, you're not sitting about, writing some notes up. You're thinking, I've got to get out of the way of this. Yeah. I mean, we're talking...
What speed do they do it? What speed are they coming in at?
Well, it will vary, and that's what kind of catches you, because generally it can be moving at 10 or 15 miles an hour, and it can drop to 5 or 6. It can drop back on itself and bite you a second time. So, and these storms are big. I mean, I don't know if people generally appreciate quite how big they are, but it's not unusual for that particular storm up in Micronesia there. That was about 800 miles across. Hence my reason of staying 500 or 600 miles in front of it. But a big storm, a Category 5 big storm, can easily be 1,000 miles across. And you're talking about wind strengths. This was a Category 4. Biggest is a Category 5. And super typhoons, I think that they're occurring much more now.
Right. And that would be Category 5, a super typhoon.
That would still be a 5. It's a 5+. So there's kind of no limit on the wind strength that can be. But the wind strength of a Category 4 is only 100 to 120 nautical miles an hour. So you can you're talking about 15-metre, 20-metre waves.
Prosperous, yeah.
It's a serious thing. And frankly, most yachts, most pleasure yachts are not going to be able to deal with, you're lucky if you get through that.
No.
And of course, stuck in Micronesia with no more sort of protection than a sandbank of 1 metre high, there was no place to stay. So, I got out of it.
Now, Dick Beaumont has been telling us a lot about his many experiences running away from typhoons in the Far East, Dick. And what hair I've got left has been raised around my ears. But, of course, we can portray ourselves as the angels of climate change because we're sailors and we use the wind.
Yeah, Dick, and I think that's a really good point, because when you're out there sailing, across oceans, there's such a symbiotic relationship going on with the crew, yourself, the yacht, the ocean, the weather, the whole thing. You can't ignore all of those issues and then just, not be affected by them. And certainly I've been. And I think that amongst sailors, whilst maybe we can't claim the highest of grounds in every case, but I think amongst sailors, the key word being sail, I think a lot of people are very concerned about trying to do the best they can to alleviate the pressures of global warming and climate change by, living and operating in a way that reduces their carbon footprint. And I think for me, the word is sail, and what better way can there be of still travelling this world using the wind? We hear an awful lot in cars these days about hybrid drive, and it's this wonderful thing, there's this hybrid drive. Sailing boats have had hybrid drives forever, haven't they? Because we cut out our engine whenever we can and we sail. And that's really the way to go. And everybody that's got a sailing boat desperately wants to sail. And I think that's a very key issue here.
I would agree. And the other thing is, of course, that like you and I, and many young kids now today coming into sailing, they learn without an engine. They're in dinghies. They use oar power.
Certainly how I did,
And that is the best way to learn, on the surface of the sea with only the current and only the wind. That you get wind sense from that, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And I mean, the thing is, if you're trying to sail somewhere, and rather than for me, and we get asked at Kraken quite a lot about hybrid drive systems I just mentioned, I'm going to tell you to buy a really good set of sails, and I'm going to tell you that you need a rig and a set of sails that can utilise every wind and every direction from about 5 or 6 knots through to about 60, and hopefully don't get any more than that, mind you. And of course, the thing is, these, people still want to see the world, but the problem, I think you'd have to agree, is everybody wants to see the world by virtue of getting on a jet plane. And everybody's got this terrific dilemma. I want to go and see that place, but really, I know it's bad. I know I'm doing a bad thing. But with a sailboat, what could be better? You don't even leave much of a wake, let alone any carbon footprint.
No, it's true enough.
And here's the point, really, Dick. Talking of sailing, as we are, I think you've got a very good friend of yours, Max, who's going to join us shortly. And he's got some very unusual ways of sailing about the world's oceans.
I think that's absolutely the case, dear old Max Lieberson. And he's going to be our new feature, Hello Sailor. When we bring in an interviewee or someone else to talk to.
Yeah, Hello Sailor. I love that.
Thank you for lending us your ears. We do appreciate it. If you want to read any of the stories in Ocean Sailor magazine, and there's now a year's worth of magazines packed with, I hope, useful information. We're pretty certain it is useful. All of the articles that have appeared in Ocean Sailor magazine are available in our archive, which can be accessed at oceansailormagazine.com. Well, thanks for that, Dick. I found that actually very interesting, and I hope one of these days that I'll sail the South China Sea. I don't suppose it'll ever happen now, but anyway, we know what's going to happen if we do. I think I can see a gaff sail on the horizon. Yes, it definitely is a gaff sail, so it's got to be Max Lieberson. Dick, you're in charge of very high frequencies. Do you want to give him a call up?
Yeah.
Wendy May. This is Ocean Sailor Podcast.
Ocean Sailor Podcast, this is Wendy May. Coming through loud and clear, how can I help?
Hey, Max, really good to hear you. Let's go to Channel Podcast.
Roger. Listening now.
So, Max, welcome to Ocean Sailor Podcast, and thank you so much for answering your radio. Usually on Channel 16, mine's switched off. I should tell listeners a little bit about Max Lieberson. Max is a sailor extraordinaire in as much as he's crossed the Atlantic 4 times, 3 of those on his own solo, in very unusual boats. The first, a 1,500-pound ferro cement 38 schooner, and the second, a Trapper 500. So both very cheap boats, but gone a long way in them. He's written a couple of books. And he's also lectured various yacht clubs around the country.
Yeah, well, welcome to the podcast, Max, and thanks very much for coming on. You are our very first guest. Very honoured position, that, you know.
Thank you very much. I'll try and be.
But he won't be the last, and it won't be his last appearance either. I'm sure of that.
Oh, good. Good seeing you, Dick.
And you.
Yeah, well, we're all trying our best to. I bet you are as well, Max, to remind ourselves that there is a sea and we do still have boats. I think Wendy May's down in Portugal, isn't she?
Yeah, that's right. I'm chewing my heart out trying to get back down there. But,
aren't we all? White Dragons in Turkey, you know. So, and Dick's the only one that can go and at least stroke Betty too. Because she's nearby, but I guess that brings us back to probably the subject that we also want to talk about, which is that it behoves us as people that live in that environment, and something I've described before as a kind of a symbiosis that exists within sailors and crews on open ocean. You can't live outside of the weather, the sea, the whole environment. You have to become part of it. And I think it then behoves us, doesn't it, to consider our carbon footprint, and whatever is the cause of it. I think we all really need to, as sailors in particular, not exclusively, we need to consider how we can best reduce our impact and our carbon footprint. And that's the subject I want to get you onto, because I think you've exemplified that in how you've sailed across the Atlantic on 4 occasions. And a point that we hear and see an awful lot about hybrid drive systems on cars and vans and lorries even. But actually, us sailors, with the emphasis on sail, we had hybrid drive before anybody else, before it was even thought of. We got hybrid drive on every boat, well, on more or less every boat. And I know you've eschewed the advantages of or the use of power on your boat sometimes. And so tell us about your several crossings where your minimum use of the engine or zero use of the engine. I think the point I want to make is you got a sailboat, sail, and I know you have.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It wasn't always through choice. My biggest sail without an engine was 53 days from Carriacou in the schooner Gloria, but that was the engine had lost all its oil pressure and was just about to seize up. So I took the propeller off in Carriacou. And
that made it a bit less efficient, the engine, wouldn't it?
It was better for sailing, though.
You actually gave up and took the prop off.
Yeah, it was a big prop as well, like, caused an awful lot of drag. And I had I think it was a 50-watt solar panel to produce electricity, and that was it. And I'm so glad I did it, because my father was sending me message saying, knock a hole in the boat, I'll pay your plane fare back, because he was so worried about it. And one of the locals tried to give me an engine. He said, why are you going back, Max? I said, well, the engine's kaput. He said, I got to have an engine you can have, man. I said, oh, and these guys got nothing, and they were trying to give me an engine. That's the generosity of those kind of people.
You went from Carriacou to where?
Falmouth was first stop.
Yeah. Well, that's a fair trek.
Well, she was a bit. She was 38 foot on deck, and she weighed 16 tons, and she was a bit difficult to stop once you had it going, and a bit difficult to get going when she was stopped, So I didn't want to go into any place like the Azores or Bermuda or anything, because that's where the hard part was. So I just kept going till I got to Falmouth and dropped anchor at Falmouth.
And then you sailed into Falmouth under sail and dropped your hook, and you were there. The rest you could manage by towing her about a bit.
Yeah.
But haven't you sailed 4 times across the Atlantic without using an engine? Dick tells me a story about you having an engine strapped down with leather belts. I don't know what's the...
Those ratchet straps. That was the Gloria.
Oh, ratchets. Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah.
You could do a lot of ratchet straps. But that voyage taught me so much, and the experience of being part of the sea was just unforgettable. And I wanted to do it again the next time in a 27-foot fiberglass boat. I did the next transatlantic trip on that one, and it did have an engine. But I never carried much fuel. I used 40 gallons of fuel in the whole trip from Portugal back to England over the course of 10 months. I didn't plug into shore-based electricity till I got back to Falmouth, Plymouth, where I landed. So it's, people talk about self-sufficiency and going green. Well, that's the greenest as I've ever been. I didn't use a washing machine, didn't use a television. Every bit of electricity I made with a solar power.
And you should say, Max, where you went from in that 27-footer and to.
Well, we left from Thoric Yacht Club in the Thames, and went to Portugal, where I'd been doing a bit of boat building, and I had all the equipment. And I used the equipment to build a proper rudder for the boat, because she had one of these dreadful spade rudders. And I don't trust them for doing a open water sailing. So I made a transom hung rudder with carbon fiber and a skeg, so I could have a bottom bracket and give her a really solid rudder. And with that, I could put a trim tab self-steering gear on it. And with that, I sailed single-handed from Portugal to the Caribbean via the Canaries, Cape Verdes. And it was a nice sail, a really nice sail.
Just in that one, just on that leg, Max, it's quite interesting. I mean, fantastic achievement. And what I love is, here's a guy, in one sentence has redesigned a production boat because he thinks he's got better ideas, and he did have, and he proved it. But you went to the Cape Verdes, Max, and I'm wondering was that because you found that the trade winds had altered?
Those winds followed the book,
right,
more or less. It's the old. If you look at the wind, what do you call it? Compass on the chart.
The wind roses,
the wind roses.
The wind atlas.
The wind pilots. That's what I use all the time.
That followed it, and it's the same with the trip. If I can go back to the Gloria trip,
please do.
When I told my friends I was leaving Carriacou, I had a lot of well experienced. One of the most delightful parts of sailing to these far off places is the people you meet, and there's people like Paul Erskine Johnson and
famous name.
Yeah, there's people like that, and they're very, more than willing to pass on this wonderful knowledge that they have. And Paul Johnson said to me before I left, I had a lecture from him on his boat, and he said, "Do not cut the corner." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You'll be tempted, but you do not cut the corner." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you got out the chart, you can see where the big high sits in the middle of the Atlantic." He says, "You have to stay west of 60 degrees west longitude, and until you get up to about 40 degrees, 42 degrees north, where you'll find the westerly winds. If you cut the corner in a boat which has no engine, you might run out of water because you'll find a flat calm and stuff, and it's not exactly where you don't want to be." I did the last trip. I was surprised that the Gulf Stream current wasn't as I was expecting it to be.
Yeah.
I made a point of, I did with Sarah, the 27-foot glass fiber boat, which sailed on virtually no wind at all. I did cut the corner with that one just to see. And the wind was was a bit fluky and chopping around all over the place. But the main thing was that the Gulf Stream current, wasn't consistent down there. It was like in fingers. 1 minute you could be in a current and getting a couple of knots with you, and another minute you could be, it would break off and you'd have no current, or even worse, you'd have a bit of current against you. That was quite shocking to me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I want to pick up on that because I sailed down the east coast of South Africa, and the game there, notwithstanding the fact that the Anguillus current flows north-south, and so you're sailing with it, but bad weather is coming up south-north. And the fearful thing is to get, the fearful thing is to get caught in the Anguillus current in a storm. And believe it or not, if you look on the charts and the notice to mariners, that will tell you can expect standing seas of 20 meters.
Oh, I mean, goodness.
Yeah, right. But anyhow, the point isn't really that. The point is that when I sailed down, everybody told me, the game is to pick up the Anguillus current and sit in that. And how you find the Anguillus current is by using one of those guns with a temperature, or obviously you can drop a thermometer in, and then you see the current is a lot warmer than the ambient temperature of the sea around, and you know you're picking it up. But we had a hell of a job finding that, and the most we picked up as a benefit from the Anguillus current at that time was about 1.5 knots, but it was supposed to be flowing at 4 and 5 knots, and was almost expected to be like a road that you would come 20 mile out and off the coast, and you'll be picking up the Anguillus current. But it wasn't there. And when I got to South Africa, I was talking to a lot of local yachtsmen, and they'd noticed a big variation in the Anguillus current over the last 10 years. So I think that's another. And I think didn't you say something about that, Dickie?
Yes, I think what Mac's experience bears that out, and that is, I mean, the kind of received wisdom is because of the polar ice caps melting, more fresh water is coming down, especially down that coastline, and is either kind of weakening the Gulf Stream or is making it change direction. And it sounds very much like what Max was experienced with, once a knot or two with you, then it drying up, then it coming against you. Sounds very much as though it is being watered down. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think it brings us back to the point why it's been great to have Max on, is that, he has found a way of traveling the earth, avoiding the one thing that I do believe, it doesn't matter how kind of thick-skinned people are, I think everybody feels a certain amount of responsibility of getting on an aeroplane and traveling off to parts of the world, as a tourist. And obviously the obvious thing to say here is that the best way of traveling the world, even if it wasn't from an ecological standpoint, has got to be a sailing boat. But then but the real issue, and this is the one I think we would like to make most strongly, if you've got a sailboat, then you need to do that. You need to sail, and you need to spend your money on decent sails that allow you to harness the wind from, really 5 or 6 knots of wind and upwards. And that's what, that is what we're very focused on trying to do. And I mean, it happens that despite the fact, and this is not like trying to make this a sales point, but it happens that in Kraken yachts against most of our competition at maximum sail, she's carrying up to 50% more sail as a maximum. And that just simply means you can, because everybody's all worried, aren't they, all the time, Max, about storms. And of course you should be. But if you haven't got sufficient sail area to sail the boat, then, you know, you're going to start, obviously, as you've done, accepting that and standing for very long passages. What's wrong with that? It's about the voyage, not the destination, after all. And our sail areas are bigger, which means that boats can sail down utilising anything from about 5 or 6 knots of wind and keep up a reasonable distance. And I think that's there's other elements, of course, which I think you've touched on too, Max. There's other elements of how we might reduce our carbon footprint when we are on board. But the game has got to be, the main way has got to be to use the element of hybrid drive that we've got, which is the sail element of it.
No, I totally agree with you. And can I just say that if you look at, I was just reading a book recently called Down Channel by, what's the author called?
R.T. McMullen.
That's the one, McMullen. Yeah, and if you look at the diagrams on those boats, they carried a tremendous amount of sail because they didn't have an engine. And we've moved away from, because of our engine, we've moved away from being able to carry as much sail as you need to be able to do if you're relying more on sail than on engine. So I think it's very encouraging that a boat builder has gone back, put a decent amount of sail on. Yeah,
you're absolutely. I mean, that's a hugely valuable point that Max is making there, because it almost makes you realise that the sails have become auxiliaries, not the engine.
Yeah, most of the boats now are motor sailors by the definition. What's it called? Maurice Greffen's definition of a motor sailor is a boat that will make the same speed under engine as it can carrying sail.
Yeah.
Well, that makes most.
That's interesting, actually. I bet people don't see it like that, Max.
No. I mean, look good on a brochure, would it?
Every time we set sail, we are offsetting our carbon footprint. And I bet in Max's case, he's doing it for all of us. So I'll salute you, Max. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Max. There's other elements as well that I think can all work together, and that is, whilst you're living on the sea and sailing the seas, you can also be fishing in a very invited. I don't know. Do you do much, Max, fishing as you go along?
Yeah, it's one of my greatest delights is eating the fresh caught fish.
Yeah. Dorado's right up there with the best, eh?
Gorgeous. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please support us by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, because this gives sailors a bigger bite of the apple. I mean, you've plenty of pussycats on there, there's plenty of vintage cars on there, but there's not enough boats, so let's get them on there. Thank you very much. So anyway, I'm going to jump in here. I'm not going to go overboard, but I'm going to jump in because I feel it's only fair that we should give you a plug, Max.
Oh, excellent.
You've written 2 books, The Boat They Laughed At, and also 53, The Singing Yacht. They're both available on Amazon. I know you are also available for giving talks about your extraordinary exploits, and you can be contacted at maxliberson@yahoo.co.uk. That's maxliberson@yahoo.co.uk.
Yes, thank you. Need it.
While we're on the subject of plugs, and I don't want to pull the plug on your story, Max, but you do have a story about a plug.
So, I bought Gloria. She weighs 16 tons, and I could never afford to have her hauled up completely out of the water. So I dried her out everywhere. And we were halfway across the Atlantic, having left the Cape Verdes, and the wind went flat calm. So we went swimming, and I dived down underneath the boat. And it was the first time I ever had a good look at the bottom of the keel. And halfway along the long keel was a sort of a bit of a depression. And it didn't look right to me. I've got a mask on, snorkeling, and it don't look right. So I put my hand in, and it got a bit cloudy, you know. So I was just about to investigate further when one of my fun-loving shipmates flushed the head, and a big brown cloud started coming towards me. So I stopped investigating and got out the water pretty quick. And I didn't really think much more about that little depression. And when we got into the Caribbean, we moved around various anchorages. And I discovered the wonderful anchorage of Tyrrell Bay in Carriacou. And the boat just laid at anchor there, doing nothing very much. And I started dog walking to make I got paid in beer money, in beers, walking this guy's dogs. So every morning I would go and walk the dogs. As the year went on, the time for leaving was rapidly approaching. And after an early morning dog walk, I came back on board the boat and discovered that Helen, my then girlfriend, was manfully manning the bilge pump, the big double action bilge pump. And she was saying, I can hear water running and I can't get the pump to suck. So I opened up the boards, and yeah, certainly there was a good flow of water coming in. So I put a mask on and dived over the side, and I went straight for that little depression I found in the keel. And I put my hand in, and it just kept going and going and going. It didn't stop. And then a fish swam out. So I realized I had a problem.
Oh, brilliant. Hang on, Max. Hang on. Just let's reel back. So if I'm getting this right, you've just sailed across the Atlantic and then lived on board for how long with a bloody great hole in the bottom of your boat filled by Thames mud? Is that about it?
4,000 miles. And 6 months. I went ashore and saw my friend Paul, and he ran the local boatyard, and they were hauling out for hurricane season. So they had all boats standby to be hauled out by the big lifter. And I told him what the problem was. He said, that's a really bad timing, but we'll get you out. So they towed the boat in because the engine wasn't working, hauled it out, jet washed it off, and then Jerry came along and stuck his hand up in the hole, brought it out, and then, yeah, that's definitely Essex mud, Max.
So I don't know why nobody's thought of building boats out of Essex mud. It sounds like maybe you should carry a bucket of it on board in case you do get another hole somewhere else. And you can always, because I carry a two-part epoxy that sets underwater in case you get some form of collision or damage.
Very
and I carry and so I dive, as you know, so you can mix it up and push it into a hole and say it's worth carrying. But I think Essex mud must have been the early forerunners of two-part epoxy putty.
It's also a lot cheaper because we got the greatest expensive mud in Europe off the map.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to leave it there with you, Max. Let you get back to trimming your sails.
Well, what we kind of do is feature one of your stories, I think, in the next Ocean Sailor magazine that's coming out on the 1st of March. So I think Dick's going to be giving you the third degree again, and we'll look forward to reading that account. It's all very good stuff. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, Max. Well, I'll be in touch a bit later on, and I'll be glad to hear your story.
All right.
And you'll see it in Ocean Sailor, dear boy. Magazine.
Fantastic. Well, keep up doing the good work.
So, hey, Dick, What's coming up on in Ocean Sailor magazine this month?
Well, we've been sweating it out here in the editorial. We've got a terrific article actually on diesel bug and how to get round it. We're covering diving in the Scilly Islands, many wrecks there, of course, and we're, as well as our regular features. But anyway, plenty to absorb as we approach the sailing season once more here in the Northern Hemisphere.
We're also doing piracy, and we're starting a series on piracy because there's quite a lot going on around the world at the moment. And I think you're also going to be involving in that guns, is it, Dick?
Yes, guns on board, isn't it? Because, as you say, piracy is on the increase. Attacks, especially on the west coast of Africa now, as well as the famous Somali on the eastern side attacks. And of course, we've got the probably rather sad account of which happened many years ago now, but Sir Peter Blake, probably the world's most famous yachtsman at the time, was shot and killed by pirates in the Amazon. I interviewed his widow.
That opens the subject of should you carry a gun on board or shouldn't you? And we're going to try and get, aren't we? We're going to try and get some varying viewpoints on that, because I think there's a lot more to that than meets the eye. It's not straightforward, the guns on board issue.
No.
So I've certainly got my views on that. There's places I've never carried a gun on board, but there's places I wished I had. But as I say, it's not a simple issue. So that would be interesting. And I think we're also going to follow up on today's podcast and do an article about perhaps more in-depth article about climate change and how it affects sailing. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot in it. Last month was 52 pages. It was a very big spread, and of course, and we're still maintaining that. There's no advertising, and means we can stay impartial, doesn't it? As I know you're very keen to do.
Yes, indeed. I think it's a brave move on your part to have the magazine running without advertising, because I think it's certainly worthy of it. But so far, so good. No advertising. I mean, bearing in mind, looking back over the years, Yachting Monthly, the readers you could never win with this issue, because they'd ring up and say, oh, it's all advertising. And I'd say, well, hang on a minute. If you counted the editorial pages, which actually never really altered from about 88, as I recall, I said, it's thinner. You're right. I said, it's thinner because there's less adverts in it, because advertising's drying up.
Is that right? So the editorial content has remained the same, is it?
Yes, pretty much. But they still like a thick magazine. They whinge about adverts, but I said, well, you shouldn't whinge about it. It's all editorial now. It's just thinner. Yeah. You're not getting as much paper.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting to compare pages of content in the major mags, Yachting Monthly, Yachting World, and Sail, and see how Ocean Sailor stacks up. With 52 pages as was last month, I'd have thought we got to be up there. And of course, we're also trying to focus on the issues concerning more specifically around blue water sailing rather than general sailing. It's I think Ocean Sailor magazine has now got subscribers from more than 75 countries around the world. That's pretty good going in 12 months, eh?
It is very good going in 12 months. I don't think anyone would dispute that. And the fact is, it's sitting there already online. It looks like a hard copy magazine as you would look at it online, but there it is online. And you just have to click and you get it, and it's great, And it's more accessible than even some of the online editions of the hard copy extant magazines. Well, the iceberg of fate has thawed enough to fit into the gin and tonic of destiny. So it's bye-bye from me and goodbye from Dick, and thank you so much for listening. We look forward to you joining us on the next podcast.